So we talked about long adjectives taking more before them and in the comparative form and the most in the superlative form. But there are cases when an adjective, even though has two syllables, they do not take er or est after them, but more and most in the beginning. For example, boring, it has two syllables. It doesn't do boringer in the comparative, but more boring, and the most boring in the superlative. Again, modern, it has two syllables. It's more modern in the comparative and the most modern in the superlative. So as you can see, in the superlative form, all adjectives take the before them, always. Now, some irregular adjectives. One of the most common one is good. In the comparative form, it goes better, and in the superlative, the best. While bad, in the comparative, goes worse, and in the superlative, the worst. Careful with t in the superlative form. While far, in the comparative, it has two comparatives: further, which is the most common one, or farther. The most common one is the first one, further, but you will see them both. And in the superlative form, again, two forms: the furthest or the farthest. The most common one is the first one, the furthest. While we have another use, which is as, with an adjective in the base form in the middle. So this is another form we use to compare. What you need to remember is that in between as, the adjective is always in its base form. So we say as big as, but not as bigger as. It's incorrect. As small as, but not as smaller as. As far as, not as further as. Why? Because this as, it's the same thing as this er in the end. So it's the comparative form. Now, some examples. He is older than you. The comparative form, comparing two people. He is the oldest in class. It's comparing one person to a group of people. He is the oldest of all. Be careful, do not pronounce this off, not with f, but v. There is the pronunciation of all. Of all. He is the oldest of all. He isn't older than you. Again, we are comparing two people. The comparative form. Isn't he the oldest in the class? So isn't he older than you was the first one. Isn't he the oldest in the class? So we are comparing one person to a group, the superlative form. It isn't as cheap in the US as it is in the UK. With the US and the UK, we always use the in front of them. So as in the middle is the base form cheap. The US isn't as cheap as the UK, again, as cheap as. I'm not as worried as you are. We've got as in the middle, worried, the adjective. So worry is the verb and worried the adjective. My car isn't as expensive as yours. While my car isn't so expensive as yours, it's roughly the same thing, with a little bit of a difference. Is it hotter in Rome than in Milan? Comparing two cities. While if we say, does it get hotter in Rome than in Milan, we use a full verb, so there is no is, but does now. Warm, while hot is a higher temperature than warm. Get hot or get hotter. Is it much hotter in Rome than in London? Again, much in this case is a way to emphasize the adjective and has nothing to do with the comparative form. Many students say, is it more hotter? You cannot say more before another adjective with er in the end, because they are the same thing.